Land Relationship Visioning, a digital self-guided resource for First Nation land practitioners, developed with input from the Canadian Wildlife Service of Environment and Climate Change Canada, Cambium Indigenous Professional Services, and the Ontario Aboriginal Lands Association. Land relationship visioning is a multi-process, community-driven exercise designed to identify your community's significant spaces and species and develop a decision-making process to protect them. It is a plan for the future relationship between your community and the land. Land relationship visioning enables Indigenous-led conservation that can influence community decisions when determining priorities for the present and future. The main goals are to maintain and enhance functioning habitats, maintain and enhance wildlife populations, and protect community-determined significant spaces. This resource aims to facilitate Indigenous-led conservation that enables communities to make informed decisions about land use planning. By using this resource, you can have a document ready to guide land use decisions in your community. This document will be based off of your land relationship vision, determined by your understanding of key habitats in the community, a community inventory of species at risk, and other significant species and spaces specific to your community. This resource will allow the community to understand where gaps are to direct future priority projects. This resource also helps to develop community-based engagement techniques in order to gather input and share information to inform the land relationship vision. Altogether, this resource will help to develop a land relationship vision and process to protect significant species and spaces in your community. This toolbox is designed to support your effort to understand and document a land relationship vision for your community. Included within this toolbox is a narrated phased slide deck, which provides technical knowledge and support to guide the process. Community engagement ideas are also included within every module to assist in information gathering and sharing processes. Within this toolbox, you will find practical tools including integrated Microsoft Word and Excel templates to document your findings. Lastly, this toolbox has links to external sources contained throughout the slide deck and within the Tab 1 resource table included in Toolset 1. There are 5 modules contained within this toolkit. Module 1 will help you to understand the process of land relationship visioning and its importance. Module 2 will help you understand natural heritage inventories and species of importance. Module 3 will discuss important spaces, how to identify and document key habitats and other important spaces within your community. Module 4 will discuss different methods of mapping and importance of maps. Module 5 will discuss how to use your vision to guide community decisions, a how-to guide for developing and implementing a land vision assessment report. Module 1. Understanding the land relationship visioning process. What is land relationship visioning and why is it important? In this section, we will discuss what is land relationship visioning, the importance of land relationship visioning, braiding traditional knowledge with Western science, the keys to land relationship visioning, the tool for this module, important resources for conservation planning, and the engagement opportunity, identifying a champion. Land relationship visioning includes a process, a goal, collaboration, and an outcome. The process of looking to the future and making decisions based on lands and waters within your community that you wish to document and protect is a key component of land relationship visioning. The goal of land relationship visioning is to establish community values on the development of lands, housing, and other important community initiatives such as hunting and harvesting negotiations. In this regard, land relationship visioning can help to affirm rights. The collaboration between Western science and Indigenous knowledge is a main component of land relationship visioning. It aims to braid Western science with traditional Indigenous knowledge in order to facilitate environmental and conservation planning within communities. Land relationship visioning can help to inform a community conservation plan, a vision for the future ecological health of an area that can be used to develop an action plan to protect the lands and waters for future generations. Land relationship visioning is important for many reasons. It can ensure that ecosystems are connected by providing corridors and reproductive areas for wildlife, aiding species in migration and adaptation. This allows for the reconnection, maintenance, or enhancement of relationship between the community and land. Land use planning is very important and can be a direct result of land relationship visioning. It ensures development takes place in spaces without significant features. The goal is to maintain or even enhance functioning habitats, plant and animal populations, and other significant spaces within your community. Additionally, land relationship visioning can help communities to get ahead of industrial development pressures and control environment-based decisions for the community. It gives power to the community. Lastly, and most important, land relationship visioning ensures lands and waters are cared for now and for the generations to come. Land relationship visioning is a way to braid Indigenous knowledge and Western science. It is a way to facilitate Indigenous-led conservation, living in balance with creation. Caring for the lands and waters is embedded in First Nations traditions and culture. First Nations people have been practicing conservation since time immemorial. Through observations, changes are noticed in the environment because time spent on the land allows a deeper understanding of the balance in biodiversity. From this view, everything in nature is connected through cycles. Indigenous knowledge is increasingly being respected and viewed as complementary to ecological knowledge in the context of land use and conservation planning. There are several keys to successful land relationship visioning. This vision should reflect your community by including community values and voices. It should include long-range goals and protect the land for future generations. Lastly, your land relationship vision should link to wider community initiatives, such as initiatives in economic development, education, culture, and language. It's time for the Practitioner's Digital Toolset number 1, Important Digital Resources to Build Knowledge and Capacity. You will find Toolset number 1 in your digital package titled Table of Resources. This resource serves as a mini database of outside resources that will be useful when visualizing your land relationship. It includes resources for conservation planning in Canada and Ontario, information and legislations about species at risk, and more that will be discussed later as we make our way through each module. Engagement exercise for Module 1, Initiating the process in your community. Identify the champion in your community. They will lead the visioning exercise and recruit project support, such as committee or community groups. Identify opportunities to teach and to learn in the community about the lands and waters. The champion drives the process and information sharing, but does not provide all of the information to be used in the visioning exercises. The whole community should participate in the process of visioning the relationship to the lands and waters for the generations to come. Use and edit this slide deck to teach community members about the planned process. Teach about the importance of land relationship visioning as a vital tool to protect any spaces or species to be protected for the next 7 generations. Understanding the land relationship visioning process. Land relationship visioning is a process that is to be led by a community for the community and will help understand the lands, waters, and species the community values most. Review the digital tool provided in this section to ensure your community champion is informed and excited about developing the land relationship vision. Begin to engage the community and identify community members that are passionate and support the community's efforts. Module 2. Understanding Natural Heritage Inventories and Species of Importance. How to complete a species inventory to guide your land relationship vision. In this section, we will discuss understanding natural heritage inventories, identifying important species in the community, using existing species data, documenting species of concern in your community, the tool for this section, species at risk tables and community inventory template, and the engagement opportunity for Module 2, a community BioBlitz. Natural heritage inventories document information about species and habitat so that there is a table of information that is readily available. A natural heritage inventory will identify and document the important species and spaces in your community. This will help you understand what is where and will help guide your vision. Indigenous knowledge systems often identify natural heritage features as they are closely linked to community cultural ties to the land. It is important to understand that a combination of Western science-based data collection and the use of your community's land-based knowledge will produce the most fulsome natural heritage inventory. Why should you develop a natural heritage inventory? There are many benefits to natural heritage inventories. They can help to identify important species, such as identifying legislated species at risk and other species important to your community. Natural heritage inventories also help to identify important spaces, such as important ecosystems and other areas to be protected, such as sensitive habitat or culturally important spaces within your community. Lastly, natural heritage inventories can help plan for the future. They help to anticipate effects of different land uses so that there is a plan. When identifying species in your community, it is important to understand the variety of species that may be present. Some species are protected by law, referred to as legislated species. In Ontario, there are species at risk of extinction and other species, like migratory birds, that are legally protected. More information on legislated species is included in the next slide. Species can also be identified by other sources, such as important biocultural species to your community, rare species, or keystone species known to be important to the health of an ecosystem. When identifying important species, it is vital to use community knowledge. This will ensure that the inventory is customized to your community's values, history, and culture. It is important to understand that some species have legal protection. Here we call them legislated species. There is federal legislation, such as the Species at Risk Act, that aims to prevent Canadian Indigenous species from becoming extirpated or extinct, and to provide for the recovery and management of endangered and threatened species to prevent them from becoming further at risk. The Endangered Species Act is Ontario provincial legislation that aims to protect species that are at risk and their habitats, and to promote the recovery of species that are at risk. There are also other pieces of legislation that protect wildlife, including but not limited to the Migratory Birds Convention Act and the Fisheries Act. Identifying species at risk can look different depending on the kind of species you are aiming to protect. It is important to include community-based species of interest to guide your land relationship vision. The overall vision for your relationship with the land is heavily influenced by what kind of species are identified for protection. These can be species that are important to traditional economies and cultural practices, other culturally significant species, species protected by the Species at Risk Act, and the Endangered Species Act, species protected by other legislation, ecologically important species, and other species identified by the community. Overall, there may be many species that are important to your community and that need to be incorporated into your land relationship vision for protection. There are many ways to document species found within your community. You can use legislated species at risk lists. Look at species at risk lists to determine if there are species on the Species at Risk Act and Endangered Species Act lists that may exist within your community and traditional territories. You can also double check with other lists to determine if there are any other species to note. These may be lists by past researchers or knowledge holders. Engaging with the community is crucial when determining important community species. Work with community leaders, youth, elders, and harvesters to identify and note the species of concern for your community and traditional territories. Lastly, document your community's comprehensive list. Document the species in your community that require special attention and guidance to protect them using a species inventory table. What is a species inventory table and how do you use one? A species inventory table is a way to document species that have been identified within the community. Different species may be documented for different reasons and have various degrees of significance. There are some species that are protected by law. This could be your community's law or federal and provincial laws, and protecting them can ensure they are around for future generations. You can use a species inventory table to organize information about community species. In this example, species that are protected by law are dark gray and have X's marked for the legislation they fall under. Another example of how to organize the information is to include whether the species is a food source or culturally significant, as shown in the table. You can choose to document the significance of the species in your community, but the important thing is to include these species and information to ensure you can protect or mitigate potential impacts moving forward. You can also add, take away, or change information in your species inventory table. The information included should be examined and revised every so often for your community. This will ensure that information is accurate. Most often, you will end up adding information to the table, resulting in more robust and in-depth information over time. Again, it is important to remember that species to include in your inventory are completely up to what your community sees as significant. These can be species that are often seen in the community or rare to see. They can be species that you know about or new species you want to record. It is good to record all species, plant and animal, that are in the community. Now that you know what a species inventory table is, it is time to move on to the tool set number 2. This tool will allow you to complete your own species inventory for your community. Go to your digital package and you will find 2 Excel spreadsheets to document important species. Tab 2A, Species at Risk Act Designations, is a fillable, sortable, and searchable table of legislated species that are currently recognized by the federal government as species at risk. You can use this list as a database of important species that may be subject to legal protection or have recovery plans already in place that may prove useful for your land relationship vision. The second spreadsheet, tab 2B, Cultural Species, is an important community species log template. This is a fillable, sortable, and searchable table to be filled in by you, the practitioner. Use this to document other important species in your community that have been identified by community members. This allows you to keep track of what species are present in your community and what species are considered important or valuable, what should be protected for the future. As mentioned before, species can be wildlife that include both plants and animals. Important community species may be medicinal, spiritual, a food source, or any other species considered important by your community. The engagement exercise for Module 2 focuses on community engagement to identify species, including a community BioBlitz. A BioBlitz is a communal citizen science effort to record as many species within a designated location and time period as possible. It is a great way to engage the community in connecting to their environment while generating useful data for science and conservation. A community BioBlitz will help build capacity to address the community land relationship vision. In order to organize your BioBlitz, you will have to determine a platform to collect your data. There are a number of online resources to support this. Determine locations within your community to be surveyed for species. Recruit community members to participate in the BioBlitz. Teach community members how to participate. You can use pencil and paper or photographs as documentation. Report BioBlitz information back to the community for further engagement. Make it fun, with prizes for participation and being engaged. After reviewing Module 2, you should have an understanding of natural heritage inventories, what they are, why they are important, and how to use them. The engagement tool for this module is to use the information contained within the module to engage community members by asking for assistance in filling in the digital tools provided. A community BioBlitz will be a great head start in filling your species inventory tables, tab 2A and tab 2B of the digital toolset. Module 3, Understanding Natural Heritage Features and Important Spaces. How to identify and document natural heritage features and other important spaces within your community. In this section, we will discuss why focus on important spaces, critical habitat versus significant wildlife habitat, habitat profiles, documenting and protecting natural heritage features, the tool for this module, documenting significant spaces, and the engagement opportunity, gathering community information. Spaces are just as important as species. When understanding your land relationship vision, it is important to include and protect the spaces where important species live. If a community doesn't understand the places that important species need to live, we may lose those species forever. Protecting spaces means preventing habitat loss. Habitat loss is a general term for the loss of habitat that will negatively influence biodiversity directly through its impact on vital species. Protecting spaces also means preventing habitat degradation. Habitat degradation is a general term describing the processes by which habitat quality is reduced. This may result from natural processes, such as droughts or storms or fire, and through human activities, such as forestry, agriculture, and urbanization. It is important to note and understand the differences between similar terms and technical language found within environmental policy and legislation. Critical habitat is found under the Federal Species at-Risk Act and is the habitat that is necessary for the survival or recovery of listed extirpated, endangered, or threatened species, and that is designated as CH in a recovery strategy or action plan. Significant wildlife habitat is a technical term used in the Ontario Provincial Policy Statement, issued under the Planning Act. Significant wildlife habitat has been identified as a natural heritage feature area for the purposes of Section 2.3 of the Provincial Policy Statement. Although First Nation communities are within federal jurisdictions, the Provincial Policy Statement is an important resource for land relationship visioning in Ontario. There are many elements to a single habitat. There can be many ecological characteristics in one space. These different habitat characteristics make up habitat profiles, including biotic factors. A key component of what makes good habitat for a species relates to food and energy required to successfully complete its life cycle. This may include dependency on other species, not just for food. Water. Water is key to life, and different species have very specific requirements. Their habitat may be defined by specific water quality and quantity needs. Abiotic factors. The physical requirements for a species to successfully complete its life cycle, such as particular soils or temperatures. Space. Space may be defined as the area a species requires to complete its life cycle, including breeding habitat, nursery habitat, and overwintering habitat. Everything is connected and depends on each other. Impacting one element can significantly affect the species that live there. Understanding what kinds of habitat types exist is key to developing a land relationship vision. There are many different kinds of habitat that may be present within one area. Look closely to determine different habitat characteristics. Some examples of important wildlife habitat would be rare or specialized habitats, like alvars or old-growth forests, seasonal concentration areas, like deer overwintering areas, turtle nesting habitat, bat roosting areas, migratory bird stopovers, and more, aquatic habitat, like lakes, rivers, cold water streams, and ponds, terrestrial habitat, like shorelines, forests, grasslands, shrublands, and wetlands, rare plant communities, like those found on prairies, savannas, and alvars. Rare plant communities are often part of rare or specialized habitats. Both high and low quality habitats require protection. High quality habitats have a diversity of structure and composition, free from human disturbance, and therefore support greater diversity and more biodiversity than degraded habitat. On the reverse side, less high quality habitat may have to be protected if it was at one time high quality and home to important species. Measures for protection and restoration may be possible. Habitats located close to or in residential or recreational areas or near roads have their associated species at higher risk than similar habitats found in areas with no roads or low population density. Protecting spaces is an important part of land relationship visioning. Begin to move from identification to protection. As a community understands their key species and key habitats, they can begin to protect them. Prioritize the species and habitats at the most risk. Habitats that are susceptible to degradation or destruction by natural processes or human activities are in greatest need of protection. You can use Tool tab number 1, Table of Resources, to learn more about how to protect wildlife species habitat. One way to protect habitat is to make room for ecological buffers. Ecological buffers are important for land relationship visioning because they are a way to allow development to continue within your community while also protecting significant spaces or wildlife habitat. Ecological buffers are spaces between an area you wish to protect and the disturbance that will impact it. They are used to insulate a protected natural area from the impacts of adjacent land uses. They have the ability to protect the natural feature or function of interest and mitigate the impact of stressors arising from the existing or anticipated land use outside the feature or area of function. Ecological buffers are sometimes called protection zones or vegetative protection zones, as found in the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan, the Greenbelt Plan, and the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. More information and guidelines for using ecological buffers are included in the Toolkit number 1, Table of Resources. Documenting important spaces allows you to keep those spaces protected. Identify important spaces using Species Inventory Table. Review your species inventory table to determine what habitats are important to key species and your community. Confirm cultural significance and privacy. Confirm any spaces that may not be key habitats, but are culturally important areas that require protection. Also, it may be in the best interest of the species and your community to keep certain locations private, such as endangered plants and animals known to be collected and sold. These needs should be identified as well. Begin to consider acceptable protection measures. Work with community leaders, youth, elders, and knowledge holders to begin to determine what would be acceptable protection measures to your community for important species and spaces. It is time for the Practitioner's Toolset number 3. Go to your digital package and you will find Tab 3A, Cultural Spaces, and Tab 3B, Habitat Identification. These are fillable, sortable, and searchable Excel spreadsheets to document species habitat and important spaces within your community. As you complete your engagement with your community, you can begin to document the cultural spaces and wildlife habitat that are present and to be protected using the spreadsheet. You can gather as much detail as you choose about your spaces and add columns as required. As this table gets full of community-driven information, you can cut and paste your results into any Microsoft document for reporting, proposals, or presentations. The engagement exercise for Module 3 focuses on community participation in habitat identification and important cultural spaces. Community input is important when identifying and documenting important areas in your community. Collaborating with youth, elders, and knowledge holders will prove beneficial when collecting information. Use the information in these slides to educate community members on habitat identification. This will build capacity within your community and allow members to be part of the process. Community members may know of areas that they would like to identify and include within the habitat identification inventory table. After Module 3, you should have an understanding of important habitats and spaces. In the provincial language, natural heritage features refers to community habitats and special places that support biodiversity and vital species. Documenting these important spaces will help lead to acceptable forms of protection. The community is an excellent source of knowledge for locating wildlife habitats and cultural spaces. Information gathered from community voices can be documented in the digital tools template provided as tools in this module and modules before. Module 4. Mapping Natural Heritage Features, the Importance of and Various Methods of Mapping. In this section, we will discuss the importance of mapping natural heritage features. We will then get right into the tool, methods of mapping, and then the engagement opportunity for this section, community mapping. Mapping is critically important for land relationship visioning. Maps are simple to understand. They present complex information in a well understood and accessible format. They identify important areas. Through mapping, you are able to preserve ecological systems by identifying intact habitat, such as species at risk habitat, wetlands or woodlands, and culturally significant spaces and species. Maps inform decision making. They provide a clear record of land-based knowledge, which in turn helps to inform and influence a culturally and environmentally sensitive approach to development. Mapping is a way to inform future generations. They allow communities to record and archive local knowledge so that future generations know what was there. Mapping is also a way to articulate land-based knowledge. Information collected on maps can help communities articulate land-based knowledge to external agencies. They are visions. They can be used to show plans for the future, but also show what the land looked like before. In this way, maps are important for land relationship visioning, as this vision can inform the management of important species and spaces. Mapping builds capacity. They can enable communities to advocate for change and address development conflict, bringing power to the community. Most importantly, mapping can regenerate a resurgence of interest in land-based knowledge and knowledge sharing. The mapping process brings community members together to share their ideas and visions, which can ignite a resurgence of interest in sharing knowledge between youth and elders. It is now time for the Practitioner's Toolset number 4, Methods of Mapping. For this toolset, we will discuss different kinds of mapping that can be used to gather information for your land relationship vision. We will discuss hands-on mapping, scale map and image markup, geographic information systems, and multimedia and internet-based mapping. Hands-on mapping is a very simple way to communicate effectively. Essentially, community members draw maps from memory. These maps represent key community-identified features on the land from a bird's eye view. This method is very simple and is a good starting point for framing important land-based issues and help plan subsequent mapping activities. All you need is a piece of paper, something to write with, and community members interested in sharing their knowledge. Scale map and image markup is another method for mapping. This method is also very simple and is a good way to facilitate conversation and collaboration among community members. With this method, local knowledge is identified through conversation and then drawn or labeled directly onto a photocopied map or printed image. The position of features is determined by looking at their position relative to landmarks, such as rivers, lakes, crossings, and other important landmarks in your community. This method is important because it can be used for communicating information to decision makers because they use coordinate systems and projections. To do scale map and image markup, you will need a photocopied map or printed image of your community or an area in your community. You will need post-it notes, stickers, and something to write with. And as always, you need community members and knowledge holders wishing to participate. The next method of mapping is using geographic information systems, also called GIS. This method is more complicated and technical, but it is a good way to integrate local knowledge and qualitative data. GIS is a computer hardware and software technology that is used for storing, retrieving, mapping, and analyzing geographic data. There are many resources online and links included in this slide that will help you learn more about GIS. Take a look and determine whether you think GIS would be helpful for you or your community. If so, there are many training opportunities that might be available for you to learn. A link to ArcReader is included within this slide. ArcReader is a free, easy-to-use desktop mapping application that allows you to view, explore, and print maps and globes. Anyone with ArcReader can view high-quality, interactive maps authored by ArcMap and published with the ArcGIS Publisher extension. When in slideshow mode, click on the underlined links to be taken to a resource for more information and to determine if GIS will be valuable for your land relationship vision. The next mapping method to discuss is multimedia and internet-based mapping. This is a great way to document oral and visual aspects of community knowledge. It is also easier to use than GIS, but more in-depth than hands-on mapping. There are many different platforms for multimedia and internet-based mapping, including Google Earth. Using Google Earth, you can identify areas in your community that you wish to learn more about. You can identify cultural spaces, wildlife habitats, natural heritage features, or species at risk sightings by using the draw tools to make lines and shapes. After identifying an area using lines and shapes, you can include information within a text box that allows you to write about the area, such as why it is important and if the area or species is facing threats, or other relevant information. When in slideshow mode, click on the underlined links to be taken to a resource for more information. Another way to use multimedia and internet-based mapping is to use third-party tools such as the Ontario Make a Map Natural Heritage Areas application. The Make a Map Natural Heritage Areas mapping application displays some of Ontario's natural heritage information, such as wetlands, woodlands, provincial parks, and natural heritage information center data. The application can show planning areas and designations for provincial plans. It also displays topographic base information such as roads, rivers, and municipal boundaries. You can zoom in and out, turn information on and off, identify features, and print a map of the displayed information along with your own added text. When in slideshow mode, click on the underlined links to be taken to a resource to learn more about how to use this mapping application and if it will be helpful for you and your community. The engagement exercise for Module 4 is to facilitate knowledge sharing within your community using one of the mapping methods previously discussed. The mapping process is a great way to bring community members together to share their ideas and visions, which can ignite a resurgence of interest in sharing knowledge between generations. While engaging with the community, you need to facilitate discussions by asking questions such as, why is mapping important to your community? What sites would your community like to protect? Are these sites culturally significant? Do they have species at risk? The most useful mapping method to use for this exercise would be hands-on mapping or scale map and image markup. All you need to do is invite community members to share their knowledge and provide a space to write down information. Print out a large map of your community or a space you wish to learn more about. Invite members to identify significant spaces and habitats that they find valuable. Allow community members to mark up the map and visit with one another as they discuss the past, present, and future relationship with the land. The result of this engagement will be a map, or more than one map, that you can use as a reference when implementing a land relationship visioning report with community priorities. At the end of Module 4, you should have an understanding of the importance of mapping to inform land relationship visioning. You should understand that there are various methods of mapping. Some ways are easier than others, but all are valuable. You should also understand that the community engagement for this module will provide the community with a simple way to share their knowledge and will result in valuable information and community connection to the project. Module 5. Using your vision to guide community decisions. Developing a land relationship assessment report to guide community-based development decisions and processes. In this section, we will discuss the key information to include in a report. This includes the introduction, background, and purpose, the methods, the findings and analysis, and the next steps, report conclusions. We will also discuss how to apply your assessment report and then take a look at the Module 5 tool report template. When developing a land relationship assessment report, there are main sections that are often included in general assessments. The introduction, background, and purpose sections answer questions such as, why was this report completed? What was the purpose of your work? The methods section comes next and answers questions such as, who was involved in your project? When did the work occur? How did you obtain your information? Where are the areas represented in this report? After the methods section, You have the results, findings and analysis, and then next steps and recommendations. Introduction, background, and purpose. Why was this work completed? What is the purpose of the report? The first section in your assessment report describes why you undertook this work. If your community has an overall vision statement, use it here and explain how your work relates to the vision. If you had specific goals and objectives for your work, list them here. If you were motivated to do this work by Indigenous knowledge, values, and teachings, explain that in this section. Finally, if your project had a specific focus, record that here. For example, terrestrial assessment, aquatic assessment, species at risk assessment, biocultural species assessment, habitat or ecosystem assessment, and/or natural spaces of particular importance to your community. Methods. Who was involved in your project? The second section of your report is a space to record who was involved in your project, including community involvement. Who is writing this report? Which department? Who to contact for more information? Who did the field work, including any volunteers and contributions from the community? If you involved others from outside of the community as resource people, list them, their affiliation, and role. When did the work occur? How did you obtain your information? The second section of your report is also a space to record when the work occurred and how the information was gathered. A project timeline would be a useful graphic. Include dates of community engagement sessions and fieldwork and other dates for activities that went into creating this report. Describe your methods, especially if you used established surveying or landscape assessment methods, so someone else can replicate your work in the future. Where did the work occur? This section of your report is also a space to record where the work happened. Describe where all activities occurred, including community mapping events and fieldwork. Provide a map of locations identified by community members or locations where fieldwork happened or will happen in the future. This is a good spot to utilize multimedia and internet-based mapping tools in Section 4. Results, findings, and analysis. What did you find? This section of your report is a space to discuss the outcome of your work. Summarize field forms, checklists, and assessments. Tables and checklists can be presented here and/or included as appendices to your report. Summarize any community engagement sessions. What did you hear? A simple bulleted list of comments is enough, or a summary of survey results if used. Include participants' lists as appendices to your report. Provide maps of results if possible, but if not, marked up paper maps can be produced, scanned, and included within the report. Did you collect sensitive information? This section of your report may include sensitive information that you wish to protect. Information such as locations of species at risk or important areas in your community should be protected. Communities may collect information during this process that they may want to protect and should build the report in a way that keeps that information protected. If there is sensitive information, keep it in a separate section of the report that can be taken out when sharing more publicly. Sensitive species information, sensitive cultural information, or Indigenous traditional knowledge can all be considered sensitive information that should be protected. Next steps. Report conclusions. Is there more work to be completed? This work may represent a first step in your work or may be part of a much larger project. Make note of that in this section. Reflect on the project. What worked? What didn't work? What would you have done differently? What did you learn? And what would you like to do next? This work likely got you to thinking about next steps, more assessment work, concerns you or the community might have noted, opportunities you or the community identified. Record these points here. Based on your reflections, highlight your key findings and recommendations from this work. After you have finished compiling your Land Relationship Assessment Report, you can use your findings to apply recommendations and next steps. Essentially, you need to look at the information collected and determine what can be done next with it. Do you wish to collect more information? Is there a need for more assessment work? Are there areas that should be monitored and protected? Have threats and mitigation measures been identified? Is there a need or interest for training or a community environmental group? Were there areas that needed restoration or maintenance? Are there areas that could be developed on and areas that can't? Is there need or interest in more community engagement and education? Can we partner with or learn from other communities doing similar work? Are there other funding partners or external allies to be approached? The Practitioner's Toolset number 5 is a report template to aid in the development of a land relationship assessment report. This template is a practical tool for writing your report. Refer to the information within Module 5 and throughout the entire toolkit to compile a report that will aid in a land relationship vision. The engagement exercise for Module 5 is to report back to your community on key findings. Show your community the results from data they collected throughout the modules. You can present to community through meetings or to Chief and Council, lands managers, and other community departments. Community members will keep engaged for further projects if they know the results and recommendations for work they contributed to. After reviewing Module 5, you should have a basic understanding of how to and what to include in an assessment report. The information gathered throughout the toolkit and engagement opportunities can be applied to your assessment report. You should have an understanding of and ideas for applying your assessment report to greater community initiatives. It is important to keep sensitive information protected by including a section in your assessment report that can be easily removed when sharing with a public audience. Using the information and tools in this toolkit, the practitioner should have a document ready to guide their land relationship vision as identified by their community. You should feel equipped with the knowledge and tools to gather information that will help formulate a land relationship vision. This toolkit was produced by Cambium Indigenous Professional Services, commissioned by the Canada Wildlife Service of Environment and Climate Change Canada, with thanks to the Ontario Aboriginal Lands Association for their advice and expertise.